Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, May 10th, 2024. I'm John Podhortz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Okay, guys, this is from 2019. Here we go.
News this week, to the extent that some of the Democrats are saying that if, because of Israel's settlement policy, that they would look at cutting off military aid to Israel as a result of that.
That'd be a tragic mistake. I strongly oppose Israel's settlement policy on the West Bank. I've made that clear to Bibi when I was vice president. I made it crystal clear to the Israelis. But the idea that we would cut off military aid to an ally, our only true ally in the entire region, is absolutely preposterous. It's just beyond my comprehension that anyone would do that.
2019. So, 2019. He was running for president, raising money, trying to establish himself in the dead center of the Democratic Party, basically implicitly criticizing and attacking the left. Our colleague, Matt Continetti, not here today, has a column in the Free Beacon that basically says Bernie Sanders is president of the United States in the guise of Joe Biden, that Biden is pursuing the policies that Bernie Sanders would have pursued. It was Bernie Sanders, I believe, who was one of the people who said that there should be a cutoff of Israeli military aid because of the settlements. And Bernie Sanders almost immediately endorsed the Biden arms embargo. I don't know what we're going to call it now, but to Israel this week. So that's 5 years ago. And so apparently he was for the $14 billion in aid before he was against it. Somebody sent this to me about 15 minutes ago. Pretty striking, right?
It's also striking that he sounds like a different guy, not only ideologically and politically, but physically. And I think that is not incidental to the story, because I don't think he's in a position across a whole range of aspects of his presidency. He's not in a position to fight off the radicals.
I mean, why does he have to fight anybody off? That's part of what I am grappling with here. He's the president of the United States. He needs a clean field to run on in 2024. He has participated now in the muddying and what would be the opposite of clarifying? Muddying and declarifying his own policies on this matter in a way that is injurious to him, because it contributes to the impression, Abe, that you are suggesting he gives off of not being there in a way that he was when he was running for president the first time. So either this is a matter of deep conviction. I don't want my bombs dropping on areas where there might be Palestinian civilians, or it's a political play where he's mad at Bibi, or it's all of them all combined together. I still don't understand what possible benefit he is going to get from this move. I would almost wish that he had an ideological transformation into the person that he is now being here, because at least that would suggest that there was some form of conviction, however wrongheaded and despicable that conviction might be, to explain what's happening this week.
And I just want to say that on your point about how this isn't helping him at all politically, there's a piece in the New York Times today about how a whole range of Arab and Muslim American leaders have already written him off and are done with him. Leaders of organizations and Arab newspapers across the country are saying, well, this is too little too late. We feel shut out anyway. This is the Times, who had been saying, for months, Biden's risking alienating, Arab and Muslim Americans unless he changes his policy on Israel. And now they're saying they don't care. He changed it and they don't care.
I just want to point out he's not going to stop. He's not going to completely boycott Israel. He's not going to transfer no weapons at all. I don't know. I'm not sure what he thinks he's doing for the left. They think this is a genocide. People are angry at him. People the New York Times are talking about in that story, Abe, the people we've been talking about, not just in Dearborn and the greater Detroit area, but it's become a whole left-wing thing, a whole progressive thing in the protest movement. The thing they're angry about is they say this is a genocide and Israel doesn't deserve to exist. And we've been saying this before. It's not new, but it's just he's not going to transfer 2,000-pound bombs, some other ammunition. He's started a process now where he is going to have to fight for transferring anything to Israel.
Right.
And he's going to, because he knows that a sitting president who's running for re-election boycott, joining BDS in the middle of the election is insane, right? So we don't expect him to somehow become, Israel's a colonialist state.
Wait a minute. So along the way, remember, we have had unprecedented gestures against Israel by the administration that I think we could write off a little bit because they were just looking to do something to keep themselves a little apart without changing the policy, right? This idea of sanctioning a specific brigade or battalion or section of the Israeli military due to its conduct in the West. I don't even know how on earth you would do that.
But this is where we know that the policy shift that happened this week is different, because the one person that we could rely on to try to bring some sort of through line to, yes, Israel remains our ally and we still support her kind of speech was always John Kirby. I think it's really telling that yesterday when he was questioned about this, he sounded completely confused and yet was towing the Biden line. And he was asked about Rafah operation. He said, the report about this briefing with the press, he says, Kirby warned that a large Rafah operation would benefit Hamas's bargaining position, not Israel's, despite Netanyahu's government insisting pressure would force the militant's hand. Here's what he told reporters. If I'm Mr. Sinwar and I'm seeing innocent people falling victim to major significant combat operations in Rafah, then I have less and less incentive to want to come to the negotiating table and deal. I can chasten Israel in the worst possible way because of the way they're behaving. So we've gone from someone who actually has been a pretty decent spokesperson for a policy that continues to treat Israel like the ally that it is, to trying to get inside the psychological machinations of a terrorist group. And that happened kind of quickly for my taste.
I mean, look,
he's the translator. He's the translator, right? He's the Google Translate for Biden. And he, yesterday said if Israel smashes into Rafah, when was the last time you heard him say something like that? If Israel smashes into Rafah, like he's,
Look, the United States is a very big country, right? We had a civil war 160 years ago, and the Northern Army, cut through, burned Atlanta, did a lot of stuff in populated areas. But I think we have this pristine image here in the United States of the battlefields, right? Antietam and Gettysburg, in these giant fields, in these giant empty fields where these two armies would come into direct conflict. We have this in Europe too, in various places, Austerlitz, Borodino, big empty spaces where armies can somehow gather in a kind of third place that isn't either of their centers, and then, go at each other. And then somebody smashes through somebody else's line and then, progresses onward and the other guy retreats and someone is then said to have won the battle. This is simple, flat, urban warfare taking place in a highly dense, populated area. And there is no way to wage the war otherwise. And that was okay with Biden until last week, and now it's not okay with him anymore. If they could somehow invent, maybe they could open the Rafah crossing, go into Egypt, and have a big fight there in the largely empty spaces outside of the Rafah crossing, so that the civilian population that Mr. Sinwar cares so deeply about, he's just so committed to their safety and their security and the good care that he provides them, that his disappointment at the Rafah operation and the possibility of reaching and achieving some kind of an agreement at the bargaining table. I mean, you can't really expect that. I mean, not if there's people that might be injured, because if there's one thing you know about Yahya Sinwar, he has a deep love
Well,
of
this
his
is what
fellow Gazans.
Kirby's statement assumes that he uses his own people as a human shield. That's what's implied when he's like, he'll look at this destruction and go, ha, this helps me in my bargaining. The other thing we should mention, there's another complicating factor for Biden coming up, and that's the UN General Assembly thinking about declaring Palestinian statehood. So that actually would trigger, first of all, it's not clear they can do that. The Security Council would have to vote on that, and we've blocked those resolutions. But it's going to raise again this issue. He's going to have to respond in some capacity. And this sort of dithering about coming out firmly for or against is going to be difficult for him again. We would stop our funding of the UN if they declared Palestinian statehood, if indeed this is considered the General Assembly's ability to do so. But in any case, it will at least force the question and force his hand. And I'm not clear right now what his statement would be with regard to Palestinian statehood.
I agree. I mean, I think he's done. I fear he's done with trying to triangulate, and I think he's all in on this. And as Seth says, from that Times article on American Muslim leaders, that they're still upset over Biden's throat clearing about how Israel has a right to defend itself before he talks about how he's not going to give them weapons to destroy their enemy. They don't like the right to defend themselves part. And that's and if there's anything we know about this administration, is that it takes cues from places like the New York Times on this. That's the purpose of these articles. So I am not at all convinced.
Yeah, I mean, the director of CARE, right? The White House had to disavow because the director of CARE was out there saying, "Well, it was so inspiring watching Hamas on October 7th." It's like that. That's what the lead. I mean, CARE matters. The executive director of CARE nationally matters a great deal in terms of how the New York Times will report how the Arab community is feeling, right? That's a straight conduit. So these types of stories are coming from somebody who is like, yeah, Hamas, go get them. And Biden thinks that he's going to make him happy by holding back some 2,000-pound bombs. That's the thing here.
Listen, so the Washington Post has a morning interview with Youssef Munayyer, senior fellow at the Arab Center think tank in Washington, who leads its Palestine and Israel program. And this is where the Continetti Podhoretz line that what we're seeing here is blitheringly stupid politics on the part of the Biden administration and the Biden White House, and that this happens. It happens that White Houses can do things really badly. As I said, like 4 of the last 9 presidents only served 1 term because they did it badly. So here is the question that is asked of Youssef Munayyer by the Washington Post this morning. What do you make of the administration's decision last week to pause the shipment of bombs? Munayyer, I think it is sort of typical of the pattern that we've been seeing from this administration on this issue for several months now, which is an attempt to kind of have it both ways. We're going to pause this one shipment, but we're not stopping all the other weapons, right? The Biden administration is wrestling with how to handle this and has been unable to make a clear decision. This is, I think, a function of a couple of things. One, who President Biden is and what his personal views on this issue are. The other is the fact that there's an election coming up, and there are a tremendous amount of Democrats, especially young people and people of color, who think what he's doing on Israel and what he's doing in Gaza is just terribly wrong. Okay. the interviewer quotes John Kirby as saying, everybody keeps talking about pausing weapon shipments, but weapons shipments are still going to Israel, and they're still getting the vast, vast majority of everything that they need to defend themselves. And the interviewer asked, do these comments undermine the message that Biden is trying to send to Benjamin Netanyahu? And Munayr answers, I'm not sure what the message is, to be honest with you. The president of the United States got on national television and said, we are doing this because U.S. weapons have been used to kill civilians. This is obviously a horrific thing. We do not want to see it repeated, which is not actually what Biden said. And now the very next day, the White House is saying, yeah, well, this is not really a big deal. We're still sending a ton more weapons than we're not. This is complete incoherence. The only message that I think the Israelis will take away from this is that they can walk all over the American president. Do you think the Israelis are taking the message this week that they can walk all over the American president? As you both indicated, Seth and Abe, they own Biden is doing this, and now he's getting no credit for doing it from the people he's doing it for. So Yasher Koach, Joe Biden, you have really played your hand here to shore up this supposed tremendous number of young people and people of color who are not showing up in any poll saying that they want an arms shipment cut off to Israel.
Well, who rank the Gaza-Israel conflict quite low in terms of the things that will motivate them to vote. Like it's among the last
10 issues. Right.
Exactly.
Okay. So the mythos is young people and people of color, we have to do this in order to shore up our support. This is going to be a close election. Trump is leading in some of these states, particularly in Michigan, where there's an Arab population. We got to do something. That's the practical politics of this. And they're listening to the people who are yammering this at them, and probably because it confirms their priors. And they're wrong. And now the people who have been yammering at them and getting them to change their policy and to do this unprecedented thing that Joe Biden 2019 told Leslie Stahl on the PBS NewsHour, or excuse me, Judy Woodruff on the PBS NewsHour, that this was an unconscionable thing to do to our closest, our only Democratic ally in the Middle East. Enjoy losing. I'm not saying Biden is going to lose because of this, but it is indicative of a mindset about where the American people are and where he needs to be, for which there is no evidence, and for which, in fact, there is countervailing evidence. And he is now not even going to get the people whom he's trying to pacified. In fact, Abe, as I think you said, there's blood in the water. Why would you stop here? Maybe you can get America to agree to a Palestinian state in the Security Council. Or maybe you can get, look, Lloyd Austin the other day, or somebody the other day, made it sound as though the amount of military aid that is going to be restricted should Israel make the major push into Rafah is very large. Kirby's saying they're getting everything they need to defend themselves right now. They're not defending themselves, right? I mean, they're defending themselves in the larger. They are on a military offensive. The language is very pregnant here, because what they said is like Iron Dome. They're getting everything they need for Iron Dome. They are staging an offensive to end the war. That is what this is supposed to be. And I think it's very possible that the story next week will be that it's not just some it's every bomb. It's every size of bomb. It's every munition. And it is, of course, this very important issue of the JDAMs, the things you can retrofit existing rockets to turn them, or to turn them into precision-guided munitions, which is a miraculous thing. And something, by the way, we also withheld from Ukraine that whom we also supposedly supported. Remember how we didn't give them JDAMs either?
I want to make a prediction. Let me make a prediction that I don't know if it's going to come today or in the next couple of days, but the thing in between now and the UN Palestinian state stuff is the State Department certifying that Israel is not breaking international humanitarian law with the American weapons that they're getting. State Department has to, because of the bill, the State Department has to certify, much like other countries already do. They're going to say Israel is not, they have no proof that Israel is breaking international humanitarian law with these weapons. But the report is going to make it sound like maybe they are. That's what I think. I think the report is going to describe a situation in which these weapons are being used in ways that the Biden administration isn't comfortable with. And yet they're going to continue providing them. And that's going to be the next news cycle surrounding the weapons, which is going to be them releasing this. It's going to sound really harsh on Israel, but it's not going to actually accuse them of war crimes. And then the response to that of the Yusuf Munayers and the CARES and all these people is going to be what you just described is horrifying. What do you care whether you can Talmudically loophole your way out of international humanitarian law with this stuff? How dare you transfer them weapons after what you just described they're doing with it, whether or not you think that's breaking international humanitarian law? And that's going to feed the protests. It's going to feed the backlash against this, and it's going to further bury any single vote of support that Biden could have gotten from the left over this move, because he's going to very soon, and it might come today, they're talking about, he's going to very soon be portrayed or portray himself as a guy who's still transferring weapons, despite look at all these horrible things that are happening. And they're going to say it's a warning shot to Israel, but it's going to be interpreted as on the record major criticism of the way that Israel is prosecuting this war.
Which leads me again to a point I was sort of moving toward yesterday. We are on the verge here of Joe Biden moving in a week from having been the friendliest U.S. president to Israel during a crisis to being its biggest enemy. Because that report, which is not his, it sort of has to be supplied, apparently, right? It's some part of reporting requirements or something, is being written politically, so that it will, again, try to have it both ways in this way. And it will increase the pressure on him, though, even though it says they haven't violated international law, it's going to say they did this and they did that, and there was this incident, there was that incident, there was the other incident, and all of that. And then Yusuf Munayyer and his people and Chris Van Hollen, the senator from Yasser Arafatville, and other people are going basically to say, well, the United States is implicitly participating in war crimes, even though they're not calling them war crimes. U.S. bombs are dropping on the heads of children. Okay. How do the laws of war work? What does international law say? What does everything say if there is such a thing as international law governing war? Hamas remains responsible for the blade of every head, of every piece of hair on the head of every child. Israel is not morally culpable for the killing of innocents when Hamasniks are hiding among them, not wearing uniforms, and not creating battlefield conditions under which they can be precisely separated from the civilian population. That is the Fourth Geneva Convention, the rules of war as spelled out by the Fourth Geneva Convention, as administered by the United Nations. That has not changed in any way, shape, or form. Israel is looking to go into Rafah not to have a murder palooza, but to end the conflict, to stop fighting the war that it did not start, and for which the deaths of Gazan civilians are not its moral responsibility. And for reasons that remain elusive to me, except that Biden is bad at this and is a moral idiot, as well as being an idiot, he has attempted to walk this weird line between saying Israel has a right to defend itself and Hamas needs to be, done in, but there is no technique that Israel can use that is morally acceptable to me. There's too much killing. We need 17% less killing or 22% less killing. We need bombs dropped more precisely in what we are told both by my friend Andrew Roberts, the famed military historian, and John Spencer, has been the single most accurate bombing campaign in the history of warfare, without any question. And yet it's not good enough for Tony Blinken, and it's not good enough for Jake Sullivan. It's not good enough for Biden. Why? Because they're politically scared, not because they have any reason to disbelieve what Andrew and John Spencer and everything that we read says. So the cravenness here, it is meet and just that they should be making these moves and getting no credit for them, and it will not help them at the polls and all that. And that's great in that way because it's a sign of sanity, but it's absolutely horrifically, monstrously bad because the victim is now being treated as though it is the aggressor, and the free country is being treated equally to the terrorist faction that is a catamite of a millenarian anti-Semitic irredentist ideology and country 1,000 miles away with the capital in Tehran. And this is where the United States is standing. This one week. Like, I really would have said, if push comes to shove, you're talking about what really matters, that the Biden administration would have had a right to claim itself as the best friend that Israel has ever had in Washington. And now it is very close to being a worse enemy to Israel than the first Bush administration and the Obama administration.
By the way, this is all before Israel really ramps up its operation in Rafah. Then what? Right? I mean, then you're going to have Israel, quote, in defiance of Biden, actually going in there and making war, and Biden feeling more pressure from this imagined threat, political threat. I don't think we've seen anything yet. I really don't.
Well, I mean,
the one thing we can celebrate then, according to Matt's column, is that we finally have a Jewish president. If that's the case, if this is the Bernie Sanders thing, then Obama isn't really our first Jewish president anymore. Now we have a real one, and we can say Bernie Sanders has made history.
Look, so everybody I know, people close to the Israeli politicians and people who are in the know about this and that and the other thing, the rumors, the messages, the ideas are swirling around, leaks from the war cabinet. And who knows if any of it's true, if any of it's false, if it's people just sort of like saying what they think Bibi will do or what the war cabinet will do and all that. But, there are various lines of discussion here, one of which is that they're not going to go into Rafah, that the confrontation is too severe, and that the arms embargo, or whatever we want to call it, is actually too effective to make it safe for them to make the final push, and that they're just going to sit and hold tight and hope Trump wins and then go in on November 8th. That's one thing that I've heard from two people talking about what is in Bibi's head. I have no idea whether or not that is true. It seems Bibi told Biden we will go in with our fingernails if that's all we have. That apparently is something that he said. So echoing the Menachem Begin quote that I read out yesterday, I think, or Wednesday. That's one. The other is they're going to go in. The other is they can't go in because they're worried about, because they're not getting the JDAMs and things like that. They need precision-guided munitions from the north, which is protecting Israel from Hezbollah. And if they move those, then they're vulnerable in the north. And Hezbollah has, hundreds of thousands of rockets, and they need to deal with them. Again, I have no idea whether this is true, but we should not be under any illusions that It's just simply a matter of Israel now going it alone without the emotional and moral support of the United States, which it would like and which it is very painful for the country not to have. Biden may have effectuated the policy that he wants. It's just, again, politically blitheringly and mind-blowingly stupid, because if somehow the war doesn't proceed, there's still going to be a vote on Palestinian statehood at the UN sooner or later. There's still going to be questions of reports that come out from the International Crisis Assembly on how, there was a guinea pig that was hit by a bullet and therefore all aid to Israel should be ceased. And it's never going to stop. And the encampments or versions of the encampments aren't going to stop. And none of this is going to stop. You're muted.
Sorry, I'm just saying, if you were part of a demonstration movement, a protest movement, and you could say, we finally got to him, what would make you retreat now? What would make you rest on your laurels? Right? That's my question. Is if you had been, we know, like these, for example, the campus protests, they've been planned since, we think November is what we've seen, right? If you were spending months and months planning this stuff, facing down the cops, all this stuff, and you finally broke through and got a change in policy in that direction, what would make you give the guy a break now? What would make you tap the brakes on your own? It makes no sense.
By the way, they are. Some of them are now saying that. They're saying this is only happening because of us, because we mobilized and came out. So we are in the driver's seat. And why would they not? Why would 1,000 people not mob outside Eden Golan's hotel room in Sweden for Eurovision and, chant and wave flags and make it so that if she wants to get to the Eurovision stage, she has to be in a police convoy of 10 cars to protect her? Like, why would you not just keep doing this?
We need to spend a minute on this, because not only is little baby communist Greta Thunberg joining the crowd there and getting a lot of attention, draped in her keffiyeh, but it's not just in international competitions. We are seeing a normalization of an effort and a very deliberate elision of the word Zionist to replace the word Jew or Jewish. We see it here in the US. Remember not that long ago when somebody made a list of Jewish-owned businesses or Jewish-aligned or Israel-aligned businesses in New York and Boston, all those other cities, and they drew a map, and you could place these. It looked kind of like they were targeting, and in a threatening way, anyone who supported Israel. And now there's a list in publishing. Is your favorite author a Zionist? Says this Google Doc that someone started. And you can add a Zionist author to the list. Understandably, the motivation is to blacklist these people, to make them feel afraid and scared. So yeah, Seth is absolutely right. And this isn't just happening on the political battlefield. This has trickled down, not just to campus either, but culturally. The fact that an Israeli contestant can't compete without being protected by the police, and that people who supported her or appeared in a brief video with her are made to publicly apologize. This is not normal. This should not be considered normal.
Let's talk about this conflation of Zionists with Jew. Fine with me. I got no problem with it. I think every Jew who is I don't know, loyal is not the right word, but every Jew who is a credit to his people is a Zionist, because Zionism is the very heart of Jewishness in the world. How Jews are supposed to be in the world is that we are supposed to ingather in a country to pursue our own national safety, freedom, and the like. So you're not hurting me by conflating Jew with Zionist. What you're actually doing is you are now making it very clear that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So in that sense, there's a clarifying effect here. When they make lists of Zionists in publishing or Zionists in music, which you, Christine, you've been sort of providing to us in the last day or last couple of hours, good. Let every Jew who thinks that they can somehow cleanse themselves of a connection to the Jewish state simply by tweeting out Queers for Palestine logos, or putting it on their Insta, that they're not safe. They're not. Nobody in that world of Greta Thunbergian moral monstrousness is going to care whether you give money to the Friends of the IDF or you give money to CARE. They're going to still come after you. If and so, thanks. Thanks for trying to make it clear to the feckless Jews in America and elsewhere who believe themselves, who think that if they just share ideological commonality with the people who want to see the destruction of the Jewish people, they will somehow be separated out. There's no separating us out now. It's the rain will falleth on the just and unjust alike, depending on who you think is just and who you think is unjust.
And this question actually has a long history. There was a recent play on Broadway, A Prayer for the French Republic, that wrestled with this in the context of a Jewish family in Paris, and should they stay? Should they go to Israel? Do we assimilate and get along? And then it sort of casts back into history and looks at people who made that choice versus others who didn't. And so it's not as if this is a new challenge. But what is new, I think, and what is very disturbing is that instead of, and again, to look at the people who should be holding the powerful to account, right now these mobs are pretty powerful, right? They're actually getting change made, both policy-wise in the Biden administration, on campuses where administrators are cowed, and now at international musical competitions. The difference now is that nobody's holding those mobs to account. Instead, we get all these explainers about how, no, let's parse the difference between, you can be totally anti-Zionist, but still be pro-Jewish. And we've seen this since October 7th. There's been this concerted effort on the part of our elite intelligentsia to explain this all to us. Well, I'm sorry, this cannot be explained away anymore. It has to be called out for what it is. And I think that's going to be a really heavy lift for a lot of sort of liberal, moderate-minded Jewish Americans who, as you say, John, just want to kind of say, I really care about Palestinian children, and I don't think Israel is all that great about certain things. Well, guess what? They're coming for anyone who has a Jewish surname or who might be Jewish. That is exactly what these lists are about. And I don't think it's possible to sugarcoat that any longer.
Yeah, I also want to mention Biden is impressed by these mobs, and in his being impressed by them, he's going counter to the majority of Americans. Americans can't stand these mobs. I mean, poll after poll show, including among their own age cohort, they are not popular. So he's not only doing something horrific to a great U.S. ally in its time of need, he is going against the will of the American people.
So I don't my commonality with everyday American people, or my experience of everyday American people living where I live and leading the kind of life I live is, I will confess, limited. But I do want to say that, I mean, I think I'm an American, and I'm a patriotic and loyal American, and I don't have the Saul Steinberg New Yorker poster view of the rest of the country. So I think I'm better suited to understanding where the country is than a lot of people who live where I live or where we live. But anecdotally, and again, this is a weird set of anecdotes because they involve very well-to-do people, mostly Jewish, all that. But in the last 36 hours, I have now counted 11 people whom I would describe as virulently anti-Trump, hated him from 2015 onward. I'm not talking about now, intellectual. I'm not talking about the never Trumpers and people who give to the Lincoln Project and stuff like that. People, businessmen, bankers, doctors, people like that, virulently anti-Trump, who have without my solicitation, called me or sent me a text saying I'm voting for Trump in November. Now, that is not a representative sample, but nothing like it has ever happened to me before in any way, shape, or form on any subject under the sun. Every single one of those people voted for Biden in 2020. Do I think that in the end they're all going to vote for Trump? Probably not. Do I think any of them is going to vote for Biden in November? No. They will stay home or they will vote for Trump, or they will write in John Fetterman. I'm hearing a lot of I'm writing in John Fetterman, by the way. I mean, literally 4 people said to me, I'm writing in John Fetterman. So
I think that the Zionism, Judaism distinction, such as it is important to understand this reaction, right? The people you're talking about are not stupid people. So, they may be whatever their politics are, they don't actually believe when somebody uses, Zionist to mean Jew. They know what they mean. Like they know that Biden is kowtowing now to these anti-Semites on campus. Like there's no getting, and that's part of the problem, is that the euphemism, roller coaster that these protesters keep trying to put us on, it doesn't fool everybody that it seems to fool, right? Just because you're a registered Democrat, and even if you vote for Biden this time, it doesn't mean you're fooled by the distinction that they're making. They know. So something is changing, I think, in the way that, whether it affects enough votes or not is a sort of different question than people since October 7th have generally woken up to what the people in this protest movement and people who they thought were their allies, at least some of the time, really think and really believe. And so that's the sort of thing that, even aside from votes, they are horrified that this is gaining traction, even if they don't vote for Trump, right? They are horrified at watching what they're watching. That's a hard thing to measure, numerically, but it's absolutely happening, right?
But you can see culturally. So that there was a story the other day in the New York Times that I think encapsulated perfectly the last gasp of trying to pretend like this is a broader problem and we all see this, and it's really not just these crazy leftist anti-Jews. No, because they said, look at all these Republicans who are condemning the protests for their anti-Semitism. They have used anti-Semitic rhetoric in the past, or anti-Jewish rhetoric. So there was this sort of desperation to make sure the horseshoe is a reminder to everyone, the horseshoe theory, right? It's not just the crazies on the left, those crazies on the right. And it's true. There's a very dangerous streak of anti-Semitism in the extreme right. It's been there a long time. We know this. But what's interesting to me is that the intelligentsia still wants to point that out instead of looking honestly at what's happening on the left right now.
Right. But, I think central to what happened in these phone calls and texts that I have received in the last 36 hours is the shift on the war. I mean, it's not. I mean, this is maybe a last straw, but it's about the fact that Biden changed policy and has now moved to become effectively anti-Israel, and that is the last straw for them. Now, again, I'm talking about people for whom Israel is an important issue, and it is not. We don't really know precisely that localized how many people in the country feel that way or think that way. I am bringing this up. I don't want to be like, Pauline Kael in reverse and say, well, the people I know are all, now saying they're going to vote for Trump. So obviously Trump is going to win. I'm saying that the shift in feeling and emotion on the part of Biden voters who are the centrists that he appealed to, that these people could vote for comfortably in the primary because he wasn't Elizabeth Warren on economics, and he wasn't Kristen Gillibrand on wild sexual issues, and he wasn't whoever on whatever. He was the most centrist person in the race, have now decided that he is wrong, bad, and untrustworthy, and they cannot vote for him, so much so that Trump, whom they have hated for a decade or almost a decade, they are now looking at with an eye toward voting for him in November. And are they a representative cohort, the people I'm talking about, for suburban moms and stuff like that? Maybe. I mean, they might be. They might be not just, New Yorkers and people from Connecticut and stuff like that. They may be like, I would like to vote for Biden, but he has surrendered himself to everything that made me vote for him and against the others 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Well, and to go back to Abe's earlier point, they also see Biden as physically diminished and more feeble and more confused, and the that's going to become more obvious in the campaign season. I was looking at his schedule for today. He gets a briefing at like noon, and then he does a ton of private campaign events. We're not getting a lot of stories actually from those fundraisers and those small private things. He's in California raising money, and usually it's useful for a campaign to release little bits of wit or wisdom or enthusiasm among the donor class to kind of continue that momentum. And we're not getting a lot of that from Biden. All we've seen so far is the big fundraiser in New York being disrupted by protesters. So I think added to their concerns about his actual policymaking are these still legitimate concerns about his physical capacity to do the job.
Yeah, he's weak.
And he keeps giving up.
Right. He can't hold the line. He's incapable.
I mean, he just redefines the line. That's part of the game here.
He looks like he can be pushed over. That's part of the point that Christine's making is this weakness is not just forgetting stuff, and as Abe just said, like, he looks like you can push him around because he knows that student loan forgiveness is illegal or unconstitutional and not within his purview. And then he decides to, if you ask him enough, somebody once tweeted something very funny about there was this movement toward legalizing pot. I actually think that there's something of a backlash now. So it's not so clear that this is where it was heading, but there was a time when it looked like pot legalization was looking like gay marriage legalization. Like it was on a one-way, it was a one-way ticket to legalization. And somebody in the left tweeted, I think that pot legalization is the only thing we've ever gotten just because we refuse to stop asking for it. Like we just said, please give us please, and eventually someone just said, fine, Jesus, and like that was, but this is, I think of that when I look at the question of Biden's fitness and weakness and all that stuff, is that it's not just the memory. It's like this, if you ask him enough for something he said 2 years ago was unconstitutional, he'll change his mind. If you push him around on Israel and he was a rock, he was the prudential rock, whatever, and then you ask him enough and you yell at him enough and he pushed this is a real problem across all the policy things, which is that, well, when it gets right down to it, maybe I just should start handing out sweets to the kids.
I want to shift gears, just conclude the week with a little discussion of Trump's trial in New York. And I don't want to, I'm reading all kinds of stuff about what's going on in the courtroom. And obviously the story of the last week has been this testimony and cross-examination of Stephanie Clifford, aka Stormy Daniels, the person that Trump paid off with the check or whatever, with whatever it is, the series of checks that are at the heart of to Michael Cohen reimbursement that are at the heart of the case. And court watchers and the sort of this weird world of the never Trump Lincoln Project lawyers who seem to find it's amazing. They're like East German judges. Like there is nothing that the prosecution is doing that isn't brilliant, and there is nothing that the Trump lawyers are doing that isn't terrible, and there's nothing that Judge Merchan is doing that isn't glorious. And it's just fascinating to watch this PR campaign on behalf of this case that everybody knows is garbage, but they're really hopeful they can get a conviction. So the latest was that Trump's lawyer, Stephanie Nishelis, attempted to impeach Stormy Daniels' credibility by making it clear that she was a version of a prostitute and she was an extortionist, and that she is a person of bad character, and she is one of their signature witnesses. And this is a totally normal thing to do in a case where you have an unreliable witness and a person of bad character, a person of problematic character, who basically, you want to make the jury not like that person and therefore not credit the testimony in the same way by exposing problems with them and their life and all that. So people started saying that the Trump lawyer had made a grievous error because she was slut-shaming Stormy Daniels. Now, I'm not going to call Stormy Daniels a slut, but Stormy Daniels is a hooker. I mean, she sells sex from, I don't know what hooking is, if it isn't that you get
the
paid
official
off.
term is sex worker now.
It is now,
It's
the
now
official
sex
term is now
worker,
sex
yes.
worker. I would like to use the term prostitute.
Still working on the OSHA recommendations for that profession, but we'll get there. Yes.
I understand that we are, for reasons that elude me, supposed to now drain the oldest profession of its moral framework.
That is, by the way, that's a
yes.
that's a legacy of Marxist thinking. But the sex work is work. That was a real
feminist
thing.
Marxist thinking.
No. I mean, long ago there was a faction of European Marxism that was absolutely about not shaming, about having a happy, free sex life and it being okay to be in sex work and calling it sex work. It's like a labor prostitution.
Right. And of course, it's the ultimate exposure of the evils of the free market, that this is something that women do to make a living because no one can make a living by having all money redistributed to them so that they can, plow their fields in the morning and write poetry in the afternoon, as Marx envisioned the perfect utopia after all of his principles were put into practice. But I understand that we live in a changed moral world, and we're not supposed to be judgy and except about, smoking or something. But I think that this line of reference, as though Stormy Daniels, because she is anti-Trump, who has been exposed in the last 3 days as having been working an extortion racket, she had been paid off already for what happened, and then she sought more pay. She had signed a legal document that would have prevented her from telling her story. And then she went back to the well and said, pay me some more money. That's called extortion. She's not being charged with extortion. And Trump didn't have to pay it. And, one of the many things that is morally ambiguous about Trump is that he, is that she came to him to extort, and rather than going to the cops and getting her arrested because he didn't want he paid her off in some fashion or other, right? That's the story. But it's not like she didn't try to extort him, number one. And number two, it's not like she isn't a hooker. And we're now supposed to somehow feel, because she's testifying against Trump, that she herself, that the jury should not take account of her life, her lifestyle, who she is, what she's done in the past, how she's behaved, as opposed to every other jury in every other case involving any defendant who is accused of moral reprobate behavior by a friendly witness. Am I taking crazy pills? Okay.
No, the other interesting thing is that a lot of the people making that argument about Stormy Daniels were the same people who dragged Monica Lewinsky through the mud, who dragged anyone who accused Bill Clinton of similar actions through the mud. They were happy to shame those women because politically it suited them to shame those women. And I think that's where it doesn't hold. And in fact, I've seen a few pieces where they're like, it's great that Stormy Daniels is being treated with a little more respect for her story than these other women were. I'm like, you people are nuts. Like, this is not this. The people who came forward, against Bill Clinton they had their lives ruined, their entire lives ruined. And I think that, and feminists in particular, never reckoned with what they did. Hillary Clinton never reckoned with what happened there.
Oh, you remember in 2017, there was this brief moment when the Me Too thing blew up, which of course blew up because of Trump. Right. That was the great comedy of Trump's amazing ability to invert the assaults against him, right? Which is that he came along, the Access Hollywood tape didn't take him down. And then suddenly there was this world in which we're now supposed to examine the high and the mighty for their behavior, and who fell, right? The head of CBS, Harvey Weinstein, Al Franken, all these people somehow get nailed, and Trump, ends up skating through this. But there was this moment when people wrote this, I was wrong. I really should have. We should have impeached Bill Clinton. Yeah, I remember. I was there, Charlie, and Nina Burley was saying, I would get on my knees who was a major New York City journalist. I'd get on my knees in front of Bill Clinton because he's going to save my abortion rights. Mm-hmm. And that was the normal opinion, right? So I just don't know that we can trust the reporting that's going on about what's going on inside the courtroom, because it appears that almost everybody who's covering this, with the exception of Andy McCarthy, basically is rooting for Trump's conviction and is viewing this in that way. Andy says that Trump will be convicted because Judge Merchan is doing everything in his power to not allow the jury to think differently about this case. But I don't know if she's on the stand for 4 days and we're told that it didn't go well because the jury was told basically that she, was unreliable because she was a sex worker, and that's not right. Is that what 12 jurors think? Do people not think that maybe that's a problem? I think there could be 5 people on the jury who are like, she's disgusting.
Well, and I was going to say, it's just like the people who claim they wouldn't possibly vote for someone, but in the privacy of a voting booth will say otherwise. There might be plenty of people who do not find her reliable and do not like her choice of profession, who will not say it. I mean, they're not going to signal that because they don't want to shame her or whatever. They want to seem open-minded. But when it comes to actually determining her veracity and her reliability as a witness, yeah, of course. I mean, juries go behind the scene. That's why it's private. The deliberations are private. The judge is not involved in those deliberations. I've been on many juries. You can tell I love jury duty, both criminal and civil. And you'd be surprised what comes out in those rooms. Wow. Do people kind of shock you with their opinions?
and they're normal. Sometimes, I think normal opinions also here, whatever you think of what Stormy Daniels does for a living, you can still critique her specific behavior and motivations in this case, right? I think a lot about in this case, it reminds me a lot of there was a New York Times reporter who was found out to have slept with her source in the government to get these stories. It was a few years ago, and she was moved off to another beat or something like that. And when people criticized it, other people came in and said, you're slut shaming.
Yeah.
And they're saying, no, I'm not saying we should assume women sleep with their sources to get their stories. I'm saying this person did something unethical.
Hey, I saw it on House of Cards.
Right. But this person,
so it has to be true,
to be sleeping with her source while she was publishing these stories. And all I'm saying is that particular behavior is unethical. And I think that's what you get with the Stormy Daniels thing. You zoom out and you get the political world is like, oh, they're slut shaming. Oh, of course they're attacking the woman. Oh, of course, it's part of.
Let me give you an analogy.
But normal people are like, what she did here, I don't know.
Okay, so you're saying that they won't slut shame her. They're just not going to like her behavior. I'm saying which is, How about the idea that somebody that realistically you might not have wanted to bring the case at all under other circumstances because it would rely on the testimony of a convicted felon, Michael Cohen, and a prostitute, Stormy Daniels, as the leading witnesses against you. Some prosecutors would go, I'm not getting anywhere near a jury with this cast of characters. Like, this is what prosecutorial discretion is about. Sometimes your witnesses are not going to achieve the standard that you're just handing the defense the means to achieve an acquittal. And aside from that, I don't know that normal people who haven't gone to feminist studies class at college think of the term sex
It's called
work.
gender studies now, John. I have to
Gender
correct you.
studies.
It's now
But
all
it's
gender
like
studies.
Latinx. She's okay, the term that was used for her was porn star, right? I'm calling her a hooker. I'm calling her a prostitute because she sleeps with people for money. That is prostitution, and that's what you do if you're a porn star. You're sleeping with people, in public to get paid, and you're getting paid to have sex with people. And so I think many people would look at that and go, she's disgusting. And like, I don't like that. And I'm not going to credit what she's saying. And now you're just like shaming people who think that way by writing the stories in this way, where you're saying that Trump's people have been mistreating her, when in fact they may be treating her exactly as sufficient numbers of people in the jury would themselves treat her to buy him a hung jury. And I just don't know that I can trust what I'm hearing out of that courtroom, that impeachment of her credibility and character was not effective. And I think people should sort of like keep their powder dry on some of this. And Cohen hasn't even testified yet. And remember, he was convicted on charges unrelated, by the way, to this matter. I mean, he was charged with tax evasion and fraud involving taxi licenses. And he was convicted. He sent 3.5 years to jail. Then he got out because of, he had, you remember this? He was like, what was the story? He was out for some reason. And then he
violated the terms of his parole.
He was wandering around New York going to fancy restaurants when he was supposed to be under house arrest. Like, he is not a good witness for the prosecution. Let's just make that clear. Again, many prosecutors would not bring the case at all if he was the star witness. It's like having the hitman testify against the mafia don. Many times the mafia don gets acquitted because it's the hitman. And just goes through, and who did you kill? And who did you beat up? And who did you then? And then it's like, oh, well, hell with it.
And they've spent a long time now trying to weaken, to put it mildly, Michael Cohen's legitimacy as a person of, public integrity, right? So the past 8 years of people impugning Michael Cohen, like, these same people have been saying, this guy's insane, this guy's a criminal, you can't trust this guy, he went away for this, he's, he worked for Trump, he's doing this because he got mad or whatever, blah blah blah. This is what the people on the prosecution side have been saying for 8 years. So you can't really just sort of wish away the fact that everybody already believes that he's a bad witness. Even the people who are relying on him for the case, they don't trust him. They don't think he's good. And they know that there's a chance that he could blow up the whole thing. And so if you're talking about credibility, you've now had everybody impugn this guy's credibility. And
I've got to say, though, I've got to say, I'm very skeptical of anything coming out of this other than a guilty verdict for Trump. Because to my mind, the idea that a bunch of New Yorkers have the opportunity to convict Donald Trump and that they're not going to do that strikes me as that's just an impossibility. And there's probably a number of people on that jury, because it's New York, who do think of this as slut shaming. And
look, I'm not saying I think that Trump is going to be acquitted, but and you said a New York jury is going to find it irresistible, may find it irresistible to convict him. But I'm looking here at the final vote tally of New York City in 2020, and the margin was Biden 76%, Trump 23%, by the way, which was a gain from 2016. Trump got 18%. He improved. That's like, like 20% or something like that. Anyway, my point is that if the jury is representative of New York City, there are Trump voters on that jury, and maybe they'll acquit him. I mean, for the same reasons that we think that the other jurors will convict him, that it's all just partisan. And if they vote to acquit him, then the jury hangs. And that, I still think, is a realistic possibility, though Andy McCarthy makes it very clear that the conduct in the courtroom, if you follow the transcripts and the behavior of the judge, is extraordinarily prejudicial against Trump. And if they like him, if the jury likes Judge Merchan and, trusts him and takes him seriously and listens to his instructions and all that, maybe they'll have no choice. But I just don't know that they're all big fans of porn star, hooker, prostitute, sex workers, is all I'm saying. Or convicted felons. Juries tend not to be big fans of them. So we don't have a recommends today.
I could do a recommend.
Oh, Seth has a recommends. Go.
So people who follow me on Twitter especially will know that it is rare that I would recommend something in a music related article in the New York Times, but that is exactly what I'm doing. I grew up, because I heard it and had no reason to doubt it and just settled into my brain, believing that Cass Elliot died by choking on a ham sandwich. And this is Mama Cass Elliot of the Mamas and the Papas, the famous musical group. And she died young, and
32. She was 32.
She was 32. And for people who don't know her, she was heavier than music stars usually were at that time. And she wasn't somebody you'd meet on the street and go, oh my God, she's morbidly obese. But she, for a female star singer, she was, not shaped like the others and whatever. And the rumor that she died by choking on a ham sandwich was like a kind of final insult to this, but it was not the first. She had dealt with, all that stuff throughout the career, and she made a lot of jokes about it. She had a good sense of humor about it, whatever. But there's a piece in the New York Times about called "Cass Elliott's Death Spawned a Horrible Myth. She Deserved Better." And it's a very good piece, because her daughter, Cass Elliott's daughter, has just written and is about to publish her own memoir. And in that, she goes into detail debunking the ham sandwich death. And the article itself is interesting, first of all, because of how the way we think about this in retrospect colors, the sort of goofiness with we look at this person and the band and the music, maybe even too, because you go, oh, that's the person who died on choking on a ham sandwich or something like that. And the reality was that it seems to be, it was I think she had a heart attack, some sort of cardiac event. It probably was not unrelated to drugs and alcohol. This story is much closer to most rock stars who die young. It's actually a very conventional, unfortunately, tale, especially in her era. But the article goes into about her career and her life and how she looked at all this other stuff, and the way that they felt that they had to debunk this. And it turns out that her publicist Cass Elliott's publicist seems to have been the one to put this rumor out there, because they didn't want her to be seen as somebody who was killed by drugs. In other words, the addiction thing was what you would assume if somebody died young, 32, in the music business, and you know that they did drugs, you would assume this is just another case of something like that. And they thought, I guess, seems to be the case, that they were somehow protecting her reputation by saying, no, it wasn't drugs, she choked. And I don't know what they were thinking, because if I'm a publicist, I wouldn't say so-and-so died choking on a ham sandwich if they didn't. But so the articles also kind of look at how the sausage is made, so to speak, these sort of behind the scenes, how these decisions are made and who makes them, and how things, get, the attempt to try to spin something into something else, and how you try to shape, a musician's brand, and then how it goes in another direction. There's all sorts of threads that come together. But anyway, that's the again, the headline is Cass Elliott's death spawned a horrible myth. She deserves better. The story is written by Lindsay Zolads in the New York Times. And it is about a forthcoming memoir from Cass Elliott's daughter.
Okay. That's a great recommendation. My kids, who are very retro in their music tastes, are enormous fans of the Mamas and the Papas. And so we listen to them on Spotify in the car all the time. And she really did have the most astonishingly clear, like a bell voice, and was a pretty remarkable singer. And it was a really 32 years old. I mean, it's a terrible thing. What a great note. So she didn't die choking on a sandwich. She died of a heart attack, largely as a result of drug abuse. So, yeah.
I'm not saying it's a happy ending. I'm just
yeah, we're just clarifying your record.
She was this very talented person, and she just this famous talented person.
Well, I could go into I know all about crazy celebrity deaths, and I was about to sort of mention a couple, and then I thought, well, no, let's just There are some good. Look up William Holden's. That's actually a particularly macabre, sad one. Anyway,
here's the line in the line in the piece says this: Elliott died of heart attack, likely brought on by years of substance abuse and crash dieting.
Yes. Anyway, I'm sorry, but you're triggering my morbid fascination with this subject, and therefore we should say everybody have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back on Monday for Seth, Christine, and Abe. I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.